If you know anything about Pokemon, you know about types and type matchups. For those who don't know, here is a brief summary. Each Pokemon has one or two types. These types can be elemental properties, such as fire and water, or they can be physical, such as steel and rock. Like Pokemon, moves are typed also. However, unlike Pokemon, moves almost always have only one type. One of the reasons the typing of a Pokemon matters is because of a type matchups. The typing of Pokemon affects how much damage it takes from a move of a specific type. Most types are neutral toward each other, meaning there is no damage difference. However, sometimes types are either weak to, resist, or are immune to other types. For example, Charizard is a fire and flying type Pokemon. Flying types are weak to electric type moves, meaning that if a Pokemon used Thunder, an electric type move, against Charizard, it will do twice the amount of damage it otherwise would. Flying is also immune to ground, meaning that if someone used Earthquake, a ground type move, against it, the move will do no damage whatsoever. Unique ways types interact with each other, or type matchups, are supposed to be based off of logic. For example, fire is weak to water because water famously puts out fires. I say it is supposed to be based off of logic because, as many people have pointed out, not all of them make perfect sense. The reason for these illogical type matchups is mostly due to a second factor, game balance. Ideally, each Pokemon type should be around the same power level. If a type had too many resistances or too little types were weak to it, it would be too weak or too strong. Therefore, Game Freak, the developers of Pokemon, decided to add illogical type matchups to make the game more balanced. In this video, I'll go through every type, state all of its immunities, resistances, and weaknesses, explain all of its logical type matchups, and state all of its illogical ones. After I do that, I will state all the type matchups that I deem to be illogical and provide a reason for them through the length of gameplay balancing. But before we get into that, we need to clarify the meaning of some types, because their names don't give the full picture. The grass type doesn't refer only to grass-themed Pokemon, but all plants in general. It's honestly a very confusing type name and should be called the plant type. Similarly, steel doesn't refer just to steel, but also to all metals. The dark type doesn't refer to physical darkness, but rather evil, cruelness, villainy, or other negative attributes. Fairy represents not only actual fairies, but also goodness. Similarly, the fighting type doesn't refer just to being skilled in combat, but also bravery and heroism. Psychic not only represents actually being psychic, but also the mind in general. The normal type represents two things at once, Pokemon based off of regular creatures/objects, and typeless Pokemon. The flying type represents three things at once, the act of flying, or being high above the ground, wind, and birds themselves. For Pokemon types that represent multiple distinct concepts at once, I will go with the aspect that produces the most logical interpretation of the type matchup when I am assessing them. With that out of the way, let's get on with it. The bug type resists grass, ground, and fighting. Grass because bugs eat plants, and ground because many bugs can tunnel their way through the dirt. Although those type matchups have explanations, bug being weak to fighting has no reason. If you kick or punch a bug, it's going to die. Additionally, since martial artists tend to have faster reaction times, it makes it easier for them to catch bugs mid-air. The bug type is weak to fire, flying, and rock. Fire because bugs die nearly instantaneously in fire, flying because birds eat bugs, and rock because many people, especially children, use rocks to kill bugs. The dark type is immune to psychic. The mind of an evil entity is so unconventional and twisted that makes it that a psychic doesn't know how to penetrate its mind. The dark type resists dark and ghost. Dark because an evil entity know a lot about the tactics evil entities employ, making them less effective. And ghost because evil entities are often portrayed as having special control over the ghostly realm. The dark type is weak to bug, fairy, and fighting. Fairy because of the common literary trope of good being evil, and fighting because of another common trope of the brave hero defeating the evil villain. On the other hand, dark being weak to bug really makes no sense. One common explanation I see is that in Japan, the country where Game Freak is from, there is a plethora of bug-themed superheroes, such as the Kamen Riders, and usually in movies and comics, the superhero ends up defeating the bad guy. The reason I don't buy this explanation is that this connection between superheroes and the bug type isn't utilized anywhere else. There are no superheroes themed bug types, and if it was an aspect of the bug type, bugs should resist dark like fighting does. The dragon type resists electric, fire, grass, and water. All 4 type matchups have the same underlying reason. Dragons are usually depicted as masters of the elements. The dragon type is weak to dragon, fairy, and ice. Fairy because fairies are often depicted in fantasy media as defeating dragons, and ice because dragons are cold-blooded reptiles who are susceptible to the cold. Dragon being weak to dragon doesn't make sense. A common explanation is that dragons are known as the toughest guys around. Therefore, only other dragons can defeat dragons. I do not agree with this logic. First, non-dragons can defeat dragons, as illustrated by the fairy type. Second, just because someone is the only person able to do something doesn't mean they are good at it. Third, it creates a paradoxical situation. Dragon A has the upper hand against Dragon B, but Dragon B also has the upper hand on Dragon A. The electric type resists electric, flying, and steel. Electric, because attacking electricity with electricity just gets more electricity. Flying, because objects higher in the air are more likely to get struck. And steel, because metals are fantastic conductors of electricity. The electric type is weak to ground, because the ground is unaffected by electricity. The fairy type is immune to dragon. As mentioned before, fairies are often depicted as being able to defeat dragons. The fairy type resists bug, dark, and fighting. Fairy resists dark because of the trope that good beats evil, and resists fighting because fighting tactics are useless against fairy magic. It doesn't make sense that fairy should resist bug. I guess it's possible that the reasoning is that it is hard for a puny bug to damage a fairy. However, if that was the reasoning, dragons should resist bug as well. The fairy type is weak to poison and steel. In European folklore, poison and iron are shown to ward off or damage fairies. The fighting type resists bug, dark, and rock. Bug, because martial artists have an easier time catching bugs due to their faster reflexes. Dark, because of the brave heroes defeating evil villains trope. Unfortunately, fighting resisting rock has no reason. Although it is true that under controlled circumstances, skilled martial artists can break rocks. If you throw a rock at them, they'll just get hurt. The fighting type is weak to fairy, flying, and psychic. Fairy, because fairies who can wield magic can easily defeat martial artists who only wield their bodies. Flying, because having the high ground is a huge advantage in a fight. And psychic, because of the common literary trope of being smart mattering more than being strong. The fire type resists bug, fairy, fire, grass, ice, and steel. Bug, because bugs are extremely vulnerable to fire. Fairy, because fairies are also shown to be weak to fire in European mythology. Fire, because attacking fire with fire will just get more fire. Grass, because fire burns plants. And ice and steel, because fire melts them. The fire type is weak to rock, ground, and water. Rock and ground, because sand, dirt, and rocks are used to stop fires because they diminish the fire's oxygen source, eradicating it. Additionally, rocks are often used at campfires to stop them from spreading. Water, because water puts out fire. The flying type is immune to ground because objects in the air can't be affected by melee attacks on the ground. The flying type resists bug, grass, and fighting. Bug and grass because birds eat insects and plants, and fighting because having the high ground gives you a big advantage in a fight. The flying type is weak to electric, ice, and rock. Electric because lightning hits objects farthest away from the ground. Ice because birds are vulnerable to cold as evidenced by migration. And rock because of the expression to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, meaning that rock is 2 times as effective against birds. The ghost type is immune to fighting and normal. Fighting because ghosts are immune to fighting moves, and normal because regular creatures can't attack ghosts either. The ghost type resists bug and poison. Poison because since ghosts are undead, their health can't be affected by poison. Unfortunately, ghost-resistant bug doesn't have an explanation. I seriously can't think even of a potential reason for this type matchup. The ghost type is weak to dark and ghost. Dark because once again, evil entities are often depicted having special control over the astral plane. Unfortunately, ghosts being weak to ghosts doesn't make sense. The explanation the ghosts have a special advantage because only ghosts can touch other ghosts doesn't make sense for similar reasons as dragon being weak to dragon does. First, ghosts can be affected by evil creatures, not just ghosts. Second, being able to do something doesn't make you good at it. Third, it creates a paradox where Ghost A and Ghost B both have the upper hand. The grass type resists electric, grass, ground, and water. Electric because wood is a good insulator. Grass because attaching plants with plants just gets more plants. Ground because plants get nutrients from the soil. And water because grass soaks up water. The grass type is weak to bug, fire, flying, ice, and poison. Bug and fly because birds eat plants. Fire because fire burns plants. Ice because plants have slower cellular growth and sometimes die when cold. And poison because toxins can have extreme negative health effects on plants. The ground type is immune to electric because the ground is unaffected by lightning. The ground type resists rock and poison. Poison because in Japanese folklore, earthly elements are able to cure people of poison. On the other hand, ground-resisting rock makes no sense. There is no thematic justification for this. Sure, it's hard to damage the ground with rocks, but it's also hard to damage the ground with other types, like fighting. The ground type is weak to grass, ice, and water. Grass because grass digs roots into the ground. Ice because ice can freeze the ground and crack it. And water because water can wash away dirt and mud from an object. The ice type resists ice because attacking ice with ice just gets more ice. The ice type is weak to fighting, fire, rock, and steel. Fighting because martial artists can break ice. Fire because ice melts fire, and rock because throwing rocks at ice will shatter it. However, there is really no reason for ice to be weak to steel. Metal tools being able to drill through ice isn't a valid explanation because metal tools are an aspect of the steel type. There are no steel type Pokemon or steel type moves that are tool themed. Normal is immune to ghosts because normal types are most connected to the physical plane, making it impossible for ghosts to damage it. Normal is weak to fighting. This type matchup makes no sense. A common argument I see online is that the only difference between fighting types and normal types is that fighting type know how to fight, giving them an advantage. However, this is not the case. Fighting types tend to be more humanoid. Normal types have a wider range of options. A bear still has an advantage against a boxer, even if the boxer is skilled in fighting and the bear isn't. Poison resists bug, fairy, fighting, grass, and poison. Bug and grass because they are weak to toxins. Fairy because of what I said earlier about ancient European folklore. Fighting because fighting attacks tend to be close range, making them susceptible to getting poison into their own bodies. And poison because attacking poison with poison just gets more poison. Poison is weak to ground and psychic. Ground because of Japanese folklore of the earth curing people of poison, and psychic because smart people develop cures for poisons and diseases all the time. Rock resists fire, flying, normal, and poison. Fire because rocks are inflammable, normal because it's hard for most animals to break through rocks, and poison because you can't really poison rocks, and if you could, since they are completely solid and sealed on the outside, it would be hard getting it into their system. On the other hand, rock resisting flying has no reason. In fact, you can argue that flying should be super effective against rock. Wind erosion, the effects of winds hitting rock over a long period of time, can play a significant role in the structure of a rock. Rock is weak to grass, ground, fighting, steel, and water. Grass because plant roots can dig through rocks. Ground because of the process of abrasion where sand, dirt, and other materials wear down the rocks. Fighting because skilled martial artists can break through rocks. Water because of the process of erosion where water dents rocks over a long period of time. Unfortunately, rock being weak to steel is not reasonable. As explained, the reasoning that metal tools are often used to break through rocks doesn't work since there are no tool-themed steel-type Pokemon. Psychic resists fighting and psychic. Fighting because of the trope of brain over brawn, and psychic because a psychic would probably know how to prevent or deal with psychic attacks. Psychic is weak to bug, dark, and ghost because they're the three of the most common fears. Steel resists bug, dragon, fairy, flying, grass, ice, normal, psychic, rock, and steel. Bug, flying, grass, ice, steel, and rock because they can't really damage steel. Fairy, because of the European folklore that steel wards off fairies. Normal, because animals can't really break through metal, as evidenced by metal cages at zoos. And psychic, because of a trope that tin hats block people from reading your mind. Dragon, however, doesn't make sense. It would actually make more sense for dragons to be super effective against steel. Dragons are known for their incredible strength, so they should be able to break metal. Additionally, dragons are usually depicted as having fire breath, so they would be able to burn the metal. Steel is weak to fighting, fire, and ground. Fighting, because martial artists can bend metal. Fire, because fire melts metal. And ground, because dirt and soil can cause metals to rust. Water resists fire, ice, steel, and water. Fire, because water puts out fires. Ice, because when you put ice into water, the ice melts. Steel, because water can cause metals to rust. And water, because attacking water with water just gets more water. Water is weak to grass and electric. Grass, because plants suck up water, and electric, because unpurified waters are great conductors of electricity. Now that I've explained all the type matchups that can be explained through logic, let's explain all the remaining type matchups through the lens of gameplay balance. To recap, we explained that 12 type matchups are illogical. They are Dark being weak to Bug, Dragon being weak to Dragon, Fairy resisting Bug, Fighting resisting Rock, Ghost resisting Bug, Ghost being weak to Ghost, Ground resisting Rock, Ice being weak to Steel, Normal being weak to Fighting, Rock resisting Flying, Rock being weak to Steel, and Steel resisting Dragon. One disclaimer before we get ahead with this. I couldn't figure out why Ghost resists Bug and Rock is weak to Steel. I know that's extremely disappointing, but I tried a lot to figure this out, and I just couldn't. For Ghost resisting Bug, Ghost was already a strong defensive type, a Bug a weak offensive type. Plus, Rock was already a weak defensive type, and Steel didn't really need to have an offensive boost because of how good it was defensively. These type matchups make no sense any way you slice it. With that out of the way, let's start explaining the remaining type matchups. Dark is weak to Bug due to a need for Dark to have more weaknesses. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, when the Dark and Steel types were introduced, there was no Fairy type, meaning that if Dark wasn't weak to Bug, it would be weak to only Fighting. Although Normal was also only weak to Fighting, it was balanced because of its abysmal offenses and it only being immune to Ghosts. Dark, on the other hand, resists 2 types, is immune to 1, and is super effective against 2. Additionally, it is immune to and super effective against Psychic, which was the most powerful type at the time. If Dark was weak to only 1 type, it wouldn't be balanced. They chose Bug for this role because it would help with Bug's terrible offenses. Dragon is weak to Dragon because of one specific Pokemon, Kingdra. In Pokemon Red and Blue, the only Dragon type move was Dragon Rage, which always did 40 HP regardless of anything, meaning that's irrelevant if Dragon is super effective against Dragon in those games. However, in Gold and Silver, Kingdra, a Water Dragon type Pokemon, was introduced. The Water half of Kingdra cancelled out the Dragon half's Ice weakness, and the Dragon half cancelled out the Water half's Grass and Electric type weaknesses, meaning that if this matchup didn't exist, Kingdra would have no weaknesses. To have a relatively good Pokemon like Kingdra have no weaknesses would obviously be broken. Therefore, Dragon had to be weak to another type. Dragon was specifically chosen because Gym Leader Claire had the Kingdra in Gold and Silver. In the games, there are no reliable or easy ways to access dragons before fighting her. Her Kingdra is supposed to be a very difficult Pokemon to take down because none of your Pokemon will know any moves that are super effective against it. If Dragon was weak to any other type, Kingdra wouldn't be that difficult. Fairy resists Bug to make Fairy more powerful. The Fairy type was introduced to counter dragons, which were dominating competitive Pokemon and considered to be overpowered. Therefore, the new counter had to be pretty powerful as well. At this point, Game Freak just accepted that Bug types suck and gave Fairy an extra resistance, not caring how it would affect Bug. Fighting resists Rock to boost Fighting defensively and nerf Rock offensively. Dark and Steel didn't exist in Pokemon Red and Blue, meaning that if this type matchup wasn't true, Rock would only be resisted by Ground and Fighting would only resist Bug. Obviously, this would be unbalanced, so Game Freak decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by adding this type matchup. Ghost is weak to Ghost because every type needs a weakness. Since Dark type didn't exist in Gen 1, Ghost would have been weak to nothing. Therefore, this type matchup was created. Ground resists Rock to weaken Rock's offensive ability. Once again, having Rock being only resisted by 1 type would be imbalanced, so this type matchup was introduced to balance it out. Ice is weak to Steel to nerf Ice type defensively. Ice was made to be a hyper-offensive type, with it being strong against multiple very common types. However, in red and blue, Ice was also doing good defensively because the 3 types it was weak to were not very good. Therefore, in addition to buffing fighting, one of the types it was weak to, Ice was also given an extra weakness. Normal is weak to fighting because every type needs to have at least one weakness. Game Freak decided to give this role to fighting since fighting is supposed to be an offensive type, and without this type matchup, it'll only be strong against 2 types. Rock resists flying to nerf flying offensively. In red and blue, if this type combination didn't exist, flying would only be resisted by electric. For a type where common types like bug and grass are weak to it, that would be unbalanced. Therefore, since rock was already super effective against flying, they decided to make it resistant to flying as well. Steel resists dragon to nerf dragon offensively. If no type resisted dragon, it would obviously be overpowered. However, for pretty much all types, it will make no sense for them to resist dragon, except for maybe dragon themselves. But we already discussed why dragon is super effective against dragon before. Therefore, steel, the type that is known for resisting a lot of types, resists it as well. So we have explained all type matchups either through the lens of logic or gameplay balancing. At least nearly all. Hopefully, new insight has been gained into these type matchups and the reasoning behind them. Goodbye and have a wonderful day.